You use a phone to remember birthdays, GPS to find streets, search engines to answer questions, and supermarkets to survive winter without learning a single plant. That feels like intelligence. But take all of that away, drop the average modern person into a wild landscape with no electricity, no maps, no packaged food, and no digital memory, and the picture changes very quickly. Because for most of human history, being smart did not mean knowing facts. It meant staying alive, and by that standard, ancient humans may have been far smarter than many of us. Not smarter in every way. They were not secretly building laptops out of mammoth bones, but they may have had forms of intelligence that modern life no longer forces us to develop. Memory powerful enough to store landscapes, seasons, and oral history, observation sharp enough to read tracks, weather, and danger from tiny clues, creativity flexible enough to turn stone, wood, fiber, and bone into entire survival systems, and social knowledge deep enough to survive in groups without written rules. In other words, ancient humans were not primitive versions of us. In many situations, they were specialists in being human. Start with memory. In a modern city, you can forget almost everything and still function. Your phone remembers names, your calendar remembers meetings, GPS remembers the route, search engines remember facts you never learned in the first place. But ancient humans often lived in worlds where forgetting had immediate consequences. If you failed to remember which valley held water late in the dry season, which plants became poisonous after flowering, where herds moved during different months, or which cliff path became deadly after rain, you were not just inconvenienced, you were in trouble. That kind of pressure creates a different relationship with memory. Oral cultures around the world have shown that people can store astonishing amounts of practical information when the environment demands it. Songlines in Aboriginal Australia, for example, are not just stories. They can function as navigational and ecological memory systems, linking routes, landmarks, water sources, and cultural knowledge into something memorable and repeatable. The point is not that ancient people had magical brains. It is that their brains were trained under conditions where remembering the world mattered constantly. Then there is attention. Modern life rewards a strange mix of focus and distraction. You may spend hours working on a screen, but at the same time ignore the weather, the position of the sun, the smell of the air, or the sounds beyond your window. Ancient humans often could not afford that kind of blindness. A slight change in bird calls might signal a predator. Broken grass might suggest recent movement. Wind direction could change a hunt. Cloud shape could hint at rain. The landscape was not scenery. It was information. That does not mean every ancient human was some perfect nature wizard. But across thousands of generations, humans who could notice small details, connect them to patterns, and act before danger became obvious had an advantage. And this matters because intelligence is not just solving puzzles in a quiet room. It is detecting patterns in noisy, uncertain conditions. By that measure, reading a forest or coastline may require a kind of cognition that many modern people rarely practice. Toolmaking shows the same thing. It is easy to look at a stone point or a bone needle and think simple tool, simple mind. But making even a modest tool can involve planning, material selection, sequencing, motor control, and the ability to picture a finished object before it exists. A hand axe is not just a rock with bits removed. It is a design solution. A spear is not just a stick. It is wood choice, straightening, shaping, sometimes fire treatment, sometimes hafting, and knowledge of how force travels on impact. And once tools become part of a wider system, the intelligence involved multiplies. A hunting toolkit may include cutting tools, adhesives, carrying technology, containers, clothing, traps, and fire. That means chemistry, engineering, and logistics, even if nobody called it that. Ancient humans learned which stones flaked well, which resins could become glue, which fibers twisted into cordage, which bones made strong points, and which combinations worked best in different climates. That is accumulated experiment. It is practical science without textbooks. Now add creativity. Survival in ancient environments was rarely about repeating one trick forever. Conditions changed. Animals moved. Ice advanced and retreated. Rivers shifted. New groups met each other. A species that spread across deserts, forests, coastlines, mountains, and frozen regions did not survive by rigid instinct alone. Humans survived because they could improvise. They could make clothing for cold, boats for water, shelters for wind, storage for lean seasons, and social rules for sharing risk. This is where the old stereotype of primitive people starts to collapse. Primitive suggests simple, but survival across wildly different environments is not simple. It requires flexible intelligence. If anything, many modern humans live inside systems so supportive that we can remain competent while being personally less adaptable. Ancient humans often had the opposite problem. Their systems were smaller, their safety nets thinner, and their environment less forgiving. So more knowledge had to live inside people. And that brings us to environmental knowledge. Many hunter-gatherer and small-scale traditional societies have demonstrated extremely detailed knowledge of local ecosystems, animal behavior, seasonal cycles, edible and medicinal plants, fire patterns, migration routes, water behavior, and the interactions between them. This is sometimes called traditional ecological knowledge, but the phrase can sound too polite for what it really represents. In many cases, it is a massive long-term database stored in memory, ritual, habit, language, and daily practice. A modern person may know how to use an app that predicts weather. An ancient person often had to notice the weather arriving. A modern person may buy food from a chain that stretches across continents. An ancient person may have needed to recognize dozens or hundreds of useful species, know when they were available, know how to process them safely, and know what failure would cost. Again, that is not better in every sense, but it is a depth of usable knowledge that many of us no longer carry. Even social intelligence may have looked different. In small groups, survival depended not only on hunting or gathering skill, but on cooperation, trust, teaching, child care, conflict management, and the transfer of knowledge across generations. If a group lost its experts, elders, or best memory keepers, the damage could be serious. Knowledge was not floating in the cloud. It was walking around inside specific people. That made teaching and listening extremely important. One careless generation could lose techniques that took centuries to refine. Of course, we should be careful here. Ancient humans were not universally smarter than modern humans in some total, measurable way. Modern people can do mathematics, medicine, engineering, and abstract reasoning on scales ancient societies never could. But that comparison can be misleading because modern intelligence is heavily scaffolded. We inherit schools, books, infrastructure, writing, databases, and technologies built by countless other minds. Our individual achievements often sit on top of a huge external support system. Ancient humans had support systems too, especially culture and shared knowledge, but they had far less outsourcing. More survival intelligence had to remain embodied in memory, in perception, in skill, in movement, and in everyday decision-making. If you compare the average person from each world in the conditions they were built for, the result may be uncomfortable. Put an ancient hunter-gatherer in a modern office, and they would be lost. Put a modern office worker in an Ice Age landscape, and the outcome might be much worse. So the real question is not whether ancient humans were smarter than us in some simple competitive way. It is whether modern life has hidden how much intelligence survival once required, and the evidence suggests it has. Ancient humans may not have known less. In many crucial domains, they knew more, noticed more, remembered more, and could do more with less. Which means the next time modern technology makes our ancestors look unsophisticated, it is worth reversing the comparison. Intelligence is not just what helps you pass exams or use machines. It is what helps you read the world, adapt to it, and stay alive inside it. And in that older, harsher, far less forgiving version of reality, ancient humans were not merely keeping up. They were operating at a level most of us would struggle even to recognize.